Marcus Harper had always been a man who valued action over words, strength in silence. He had learned this lesson young, first on the streets of Denver, then in the heat of combat. But today, in the soft morning sun at Ridgeview High, it wasn't the battlefields he thought of. It was his son, Logan, standing on the threshold of adulthood. The graduation ceremony loomed ahead, but Marcus's mind wasn't focused on the pomp and circumstance of it all. No, it was something deeper, something far more significant, the quiet power of being present. The kind of power that didn't need to be spoken aloud or declared. It was a power earned, one that was honed in the heart rather than in the glare of attention. And today, that power would define him. Marcus had spent the past 3 hours in his truck, staring out at the sprawling open roads, the vast mountains to his left. The truck, a sturdy old Ford, had seen better days. But it was the same vehicle he had driven with Sarah when they had taken family trips, the same truck he'd driven after her passing. He hated flying, always had, and driving this truck allowed him the space to reflect, to remember. When he finally parked in the lot, Marcus could already see the crowd of parents, siblings, and graduates milling about. The weathered red brick of Ridgeview High stood proudly against the mountain backdrop. He could feel the familiar tension in his chest, the sense of anticipation that was always present before something monumental. It was strange to think that Logan, his only son, was now 17, about to walk across the stage in a cap and gown. Marcus could remember so many nights when Logan had been just a child, crawling around the living room, playing with his toys. The years had slipped by quietly, like the changing of the seasons. But now, Logan was a man. It was both awe-inspiring and heartbreaking to witness. He smoothed his dark green military jacket, adjusted his polished boots, and made his way toward the gym. The uniform was worn with pride, a relic of a past that Marcus didn't often talk about. He wasn't here to relive old battles, but his posture alone spoke volumes. Every step, firm and purposeful, conveyed a message. He wasn't to be underestimated. Marcus paused near the entrance, adjusting the small, frayed photo of Logan as a baby nestled safely in his jacket pocket. It was a reminder, a silent promise that despite everything he had been through, he would never fail his son. Not today, not ever. He whispered to the photo, "I promised you." He approached the entrance and showed the printed ticket to a volunteer, a young man with a clipboard. The volunteer nodded quickly and pointed toward the third row, where family seating was reserved. Marcus nodded his thanks and proceeded into the gym. It was chaotic, alive with the noise of children, parents, and faculty. But amidst the din, his eyes never left the stage, where the graduation ceremony would unfold. He found his seat in the third row, just as the volunteer had directed. It was a simple plastic chair, slightly wobbly, but to Marcus, it was a seat of honor. As he sat, he saw Logan among the graduating students. His son's dark hair was a little longer than when he had last seen him. He stood tall, lanky, with his mother's brown eyes staring back at him. Marcus's heart squeezed. The ceremony began with the familiar strains of pomp and circumstance, and the audience rose to their feet. Marcus stood too, as was customary, but his attention was entirely on Logan. He was proud, more than he could articulate. The national anthem followed, and as the crowd placed their hands over their hearts, Marcus stood still, unwavering, his body rigid with pride, his focus entirely on his son. He didn't need to raise his voice, didn't need to clap loud enough to be heard. His presence alone was a salute to everything Logan had achieved. But then, the unexpected happened. 2 security guards walked toward him. Marcus noticed them immediately. They weren't police officers, but their badges read Harlan Security Services. They weren't there to offer assistance, and as they approached him, Marcus felt a flicker of unease. His instincts, trained from years of service, told him something wasn't right. The guards were young. Both had the posture of men who were accustomed to authority, but lacked the wisdom of experience. The shorter one was stocky, with a buzz cut and a tense expression. The taller one was lankier, chewing gum and looking around as if he had somewhere better to be. The shorter guard leaned down, speaking in a low voice. "Excuse me, sir, we're gonna need you to come with us." Marcus turned slowly, his eyes narrowing, but he didn't stand up or make any sudden movements. His voice was calm, firm. "Is there a problem?" The taller guard stepped forward, his tone dismissive. "Yeah, this section is for families of graduating seniors. You're not in the right place." Marcus blinked, taken aback for a moment, before pulling the printed ticket from his coat pocket and showing it to them again. "This is my seat, 3rd row, left side. Family seating confirmed." The short guard barely glanced at the ticket before shaking his head. "We've been told it's full." Marcus's gaze didn't waver. "It was full when I sat down. You want to tell me who gave you that order?" The taller guard shifted uncomfortably. It was clear he wasn't expecting such calm resistance. His words faltered. "Look, it's no big deal. There are some extra seats in the back. Let's not make this anything it doesn't have to be." But Marcus didn't move. He had traveled 8 hours to be here today, to watch his son walk across that stage. He had earned this seat. "I'll be sitting right here," Marcus said simply. A few heads turned, and whispers began to ripple through the crowd. The short guard looked around, clearly uncomfortable. Marcus could feel the tension building, but he didn't flinch. His training had taught him that stillness was more commanding than any movement. The taller guard spoke again, his voice low and frustrated. "Maybe you'd be more comfortable in the back. That's all we're saying." But Marcus didn't move. He had traveled 8 hours to be here today, to watch his son walk across that stage. He had earned this seat. "I'll be sitting right here," Marcus said simply. A few heads turned, and whispers began to ripple through the crowd. The short guard looked around, clearly uncomfortable. Marcus could feel the tension building, but he didn't flinch. His training had taught him that stillness was more commanding than any movement. The taller guard spoke again, his voice low and frustrated. "Maybe you'd be more comfortable in the back. That's all we're saying." Marcus didn't respond with anger, just with a quiet, calculating stare. It was a look that didn't need words. And yet, the words of a woman sitting a few rows behind him reached his ears. She leaned forward, her voice just above a whisper. "Don't let them move you." Marcus nodded slightly, acknowledging her support, but he didn't speak. The moment had passed. The guards were about to escalate things. But before they could, something unexpected happened. Without warning, 6 men stood up from the bleachers. They didn't speak, didn't look at one another, but each of them moved with the same quiet, deliberate intention. They weren't wearing uniforms, they weren't carrying badges, but Marcus knew who they were. He didn't have to look at them to know. They were former Navy SEALs, men who had served with him in the past. Creed Marston, Javier Meeks, and others he had fought beside in places far worse than this gym. They rose from their seats one by one, like warriors without need for words. Their presence alone was enough. Marcus didn't need to turn around. He knew exactly what was happening. The guards didn't know who they were dealing with, not yet. The tension in the gym thickened. People were watching now, pretending not to, but they were. The 2 guards stood their ground, but it was clear the balance had shifted. The short guard muttered something into his radio, trying to communicate, but it was too late. Creed Marston, a tall man with a salt and pepper beard, stepped forward, his voice sharp and clear. "Is there a reason this man is being bothered?" The tall guard, Officer Malley, glanced at him, visibly thrown off guard. "We've got this under control." Creed didn't flinch. "No, you don't." The other SEALs moved forward too, standing in silent formation, their posture impeccable. The room fell silent, but not with fear. It was a respect so palpable it filled every corner of the gym. As Creed stepped forward, his voice cool and unwavering, Marcus felt a rush of gratitude. This wasn't the first time he had found himself in a tense situation, but the presence of these men, his brothers, reminded him of the strength he didn't have to draw upon anymore. Their presence was its own kind of weapon. The guards, for all their bravado, didn't understand the weight of the situation. They were simply following orders, but they hadn't accounted for the caliber of the men who had now stood up in silent solidarity. Malley and Garvin were out of their depth. Creed Marston, a former Navy SEAL with years of battle-hardened experience, wasn't just confronting them with words. His presence alone radiated authority, respect, and the unspoken power of a man who had been through hell and come back standing. Malley shifted uncomfortably, clearly unsure of how to proceed. His hand hovered near his belt, where a radio was clipped. It wasn't a weapon, but in that moment, it was a symbol of the power he thought he had. Creed didn't blink. He didn't flinch. "Take your hands off the man," Creed said again, his voice quieter now, but more dangerous. Garvin looked around the gym, realizing he wasn't just dealing with an upset parent. He was up against something much bigger. The room had become a battlefield in its own right, except this time no one was shouting, no one was pushing or shoving. It was the silence that spoke volumes. Marcus remained seated, his eyes never leaving the stage. He didn't need to add to the chaos. The presence of his brothers, of these men who had fought beside him, spoke louder than any word could. "Officer Malley," Creed's voice cut through the air, direct and commanding, "if you value your position, you'll walk away now." There was a moment of stillness, unbearably tense. Marcus's calm was like a shield, unyielding in the face of provocation. The rest of the gym was equally still, as if holding its breath. Garvin's eyes flicked from Creed to Malley, seeking direction. Malley was no longer speaking. He was staring at Creed with a mixture of confusion and dawning realization. The two of them hadn't expected this, not one bit. "Walk away," Creed repeated, his voice low but filled with an authority that couldn't be ignored. Behind them, the other 4 SEALs were now in place, spread across the gym, their postures resolute, their eyes scanning the room. There was no need for coordination. They all knew what to do. They knew how to act, how to move, how to make a statement without saying a word. The guards looked back at each other, but the silence was deafening. No one moved. No one dared to. Finally, Malley shifted his weight, his discomfort turning into something more akin to shame. His voice cracked slightly. We'll take this up with the school." But it was too late. The atmosphere in the room had already changed. What had started as a confrontation was now a matter of dignity, an unspoken pact that those who had earned respect couldn't be pushed around. As the guards backed off, leaving Marcus in peace, the gym erupted into a quiet but powerful wave of support. A few parents who had been hesitant to speak out began to clap, softly at first, as if unsure of the right moment. But the applause grew. It wasn't just for the ceremony anymore. It was for something deeper. It was for the men who had silently shown their loyalty, their integrity, and their strength. The rest of the gym stood as witnesses to a moment that would forever change the way they saw strength. Marcus's jaw was set. His eyes never wavered from the stage. But inside, something shifted. It wasn't anger. It wasn't frustration. It was a quiet satisfaction. He didn't need to shout. He didn't make a scene. The respect was earned, and it had been made clear to everyone in that gym. Tyron, his son, had been watching the entire exchange from the rows of students. He couldn't hear the words, but he saw everything. The way his father remained seated, calm and unwavering, even as the guards approached. The way 6 men, silent but resolute, had stood to protect him. He had always known his father was different, but now, in this moment, he saw what that difference really meant. It wasn't the medals or the stories of war that made his father who he was. It wasn't the uniform or the time spent on the front lines. It was something else, something far more powerful than anything he could have understood before. Logan's heart pounded as he stood between his classmates. He couldn't take his eyes off his father. There was pride, yes, but there was also something more, something fierce that made his chest tighten. He had seen his father face down real danger before, but never like this. Never in a place that was supposed to be filled with joy and celebration. As the names of graduates were called, Tyron's thoughts kept drifting back to that moment. He had been so close to walking off the stage, to standing up for his father, but he hadn't. He had held back. Not because he was afraid, but because he had seen something in his father's stillness, something that told him this moment was bigger than both of them. Then the announcer called his name, Logan Harper. For a split second, the gym seemed to stand still. His name echoed through the room, and Tyron could feel the weight with every eye on him. It wasn't the first time he had walked into a room full of strangers. It wasn't the first time he had been the center of attention. But this moment was different. This was his father's moment, his father's lesson, and it was his moment too. He stepped forward, his heart steady, his steps firm. As he walked across the stage, he glanced toward the audience and found his father. The moment their eyes locked, something passed between them. It wasn't a smile. It wasn't even a nod. It was something simpler, something stronger. Marcus's gaze never left his son. His presence was a silent confirmation. You've made it. You've grown. And this moment is yours as much as it is mine. Tyron accepted his diploma with a firm handshake, turned back toward the audience, and walked off the stage. The applause erupted, not as a chaotic noise, but as a rhythmic, deliberate response. The 6 men, his father's brothers, rose to their feet in perfect unison, their hands clapping in steady, strong rhythm. It wasn't for show. It wasn't for performance. It was a salute for the man who had raised his son with dignity, who had stood tall without raising his voice. The ceremony ended, but the weight of that moment lingered in the air. Parents who had been whispering during the standoff now clapped louder. Some of them even wiped their eyes. The tension that had filled the gym seemed to evaporate, replaced by something more powerful: respect. Outside, in the parking lot, the sun was beginning to set. The last of the families were gathered around, taking pictures, celebrating, talking about the future. Logan and Marcus stood near the truck, the noise of the ceremony still echoing in the background. But for them, the day had already been made. Logan looked at his father. "You okay?" he asked. Marcus smiled, a small, almost imperceptible smile. "I'm good. You?" Logan's eyes flicked to the group of men still standing nearby, watching. "Who were they, Dad?" Marcus turned toward the 6 men, who had quietly drifted off toward their cars, their heads held high. "They're men I bled with, men who know what loyalty means." Logan nodded slowly, a deep understanding settling in his chest. That was powerful. Marcus clapped him gently on the back. "Yeah, it was. But don't forget, sometimes silence is louder than shouting. Sometimes standing still and doing what needs to be done says more than 1,000 words." As they climbed into the truck, Logan sat quietly for a moment. He glanced over at his father, who was now focused on the road ahead. "I want to be like you, Dad," Logan said softly. Marcus's smile grew a little wider. "You already are, son. You walked that stage with pride. You didn't let anyone steal your moment. That's all you need to know." As the truck pulled out of the parking lot, the world seemed to fade behind them. The noise of the ceremony, the claps, the cheers, all of it was distant. What remained was the bond between father and son, forged in the quiet strength of a man who had seen the world at its worst and never wavered. The road ahead was long, but together they would face whatever came next, with dignity, with honor, and with the quiet strength that had been passed down from one generation to the next. The truck's engine hummed steadily as Marcus and Logan drove away from Ridgeview High, the noise of the graduation ceremony fading behind them. The last remnants of the crowd lingered in the rearview mirror, a blur of faces, balloons, and laughter. But inside the cab of the Ford, everything was quiet, save for the rhythmic sound of tires on asphalt and the occasional hum of the radio. Logan's fingers tapped lightly on the armrest. He didn't know what to say. There were so many questions in his head, but the words didn't seem to come. The moment in the gym had left a lasting impression on him. Not just because of the tension with the security guards, but because of what his father had shown him without saying a word. Marcus glanced over at his son, his expression unreadable as always. But Logan could feel the weight of his father's gaze, the steady calm that never seemed to waver, no matter what the situation. "Where to?" Marcus asked, his voice low and steady, breaking the silence that had hung between them for the last few miles. Logan thought for a moment, his eyes flicking to the passing scenery. The mountains were beginning to bathe in the soft glow of the setting sun, the orange and pink hues stretching across the horizon. "How about Waffle House?" Logan said, a grin tugging at the corners of his mouth. Marcus chuckled softly. Of course, what else? The drive to the diner was filled with a sense of familiarity, the kind that only comes from years of shared history and understanding. As they pulled into the parking lot, Logan couldn't help but notice how at peace his father seemed. He was always calm, but there was something different today. It was as if, in the quiet of that graduation ceremony, everything had come full circle. They entered the diner, and the smell of freshly brewed coffee and sizzling bacon filled the air. The warm lighting and the soft clatter of dishes created a cozy, welcoming atmosphere. It was the kind of place where nothing had to be said, where the world could feel like it was standing still for just a moment. Marcus and Logan sat at a booth by the window, overlooking the quiet parking lot. Logan's eyes wandered over the menu, but his mind kept returning to the events of the day. He couldn't shake the image of his father sitting there, unshaken, as the guards approached. The 6 men who had risen to stand by him. The way the whole gym had changed in that one moment. The waitress arrived with menus in hand, her smile warm and welcoming. After a quick exchange of orders, she left them to themselves. But Logan's mind was still racing. He had so many questions, so many things he wanted to ask. "How did you stay so calm today?" Logan asked quietly, his voice betraying the depth of his curiosity. "I mean, with everything that happened, the guards, the tension, how did you just sit there?" Marcus didn't immediately respond. He looked down at the table, then out the window, his eyes tracing the fading light on the horizon. It was clear he was thinking about something deeper than the question itself. "You learn to pick your battles, son," Marcus said after a pause, his voice steady and measured. "Sometimes the best thing you can do is nothing. Just stay still. Let the world make its noise. Let people shout and make threats, and you don't react. You don't let them pull you into their chaos." Logan absorbed his father's words. They weren't what he had expected. He had thought his father might explain it as a matter of pride, or discipline, or something more straightforward. But the way Marcus put it, staying still, choosing silence over anger, made it seem like there was an art to it. I thought you would have stood up, you know?" Logan admitted, his voice quiet. "I thought maybe you'd yell at them, or do something, but you just sat there. It was powerful." Marcus met his son's gaze, his expression softening. "Power doesn't come from yelling, Logan. It comes from knowing who you are and standing firm in that. When you've seen enough of the world, you realize that reacting to every provocation is just a waste of energy. People may try to rattle you, but the truth is, those who know their worth, who've been through real struggles, don't have to prove themselves with loud gestures." Logan nodded slowly, the weight of his father's words settling into his mind. It was a lesson he had been learning for years, but hearing it from his father, in the quiet of the diner, made it feel more real. Dinner passed in comfortable silence, with only a few words exchanged about the ceremony and Logan's friends. When the meal was done, they paid the bill, and Marcus drove them back home. The drive felt shorter this time, with the conversation turning more reflective than it had been in the past. As they drove through the familiar streets of Denver, the city lights flickered against the darkening sky. The world around them felt quiet, almost serene, despite the rush of activity just a few miles away in the heart of the city. Logan leaned his head back against the seat. His thoughts were turning to the gym, to his father, and to the lessons he had learned today. He had always admired his father for his strength, but now he understood it on a deeper level. It wasn't just physical strength, or the strength to endure hardships. It was the strength to stay calm, to remain true to yourself even when the world tried to push you off course. The quiet strength of Marcus Harper wasn't in his military past. It wasn't in the medals or the years of service. It was in the stillness he carried within himself. It was in his ability to face adversity head-on without raising a fist or a voice. It was in his ability to stand firm when everything around him was designed to make him waver. Logan glanced over at his father as they neared home. The steady hum of the truck's engine filled the silence, but there was a peace between them now, a quiet understanding. "Thanks, Dad," Logan said quietly. Marcus smiled faintly, his eyes still focused on the road. "You don't have to thank me, son. You're already becoming the man I knew you could be." As they pulled into the driveway and parked the truck, Logan's heart swelled with pride. He may not have understood it all yet, but he was beginning to see his father in a new light. It wasn't just the man who had been a soldier. It wasn't just the father who had taught him how to fix a car or throw a football. It was the man who knew the real meaning of strength. The man who had fought battles not on the battlefield, but in the quiet moments when the world demanded his reaction. Marcus Harper was a man who had seen it all, and still, he knew that the most powerful thing a person could do was to remain silent, to stand firm, and to carry their strength in a way that was felt but never seen. As Marcus and Logan stepped into the house, the door closing softly behind them, Marcus turned to his son with a small but meaningful smile. "One more thing, Logan," he said, his voice steady but filled with a rare warmth. "It's not about what happens to you. It's about how you respond. Life will challenge you. It'll throw things your way that you can't control. But the one thing no one can ever take from you is how you choose to carry yourself." Logan stood still, taking in his father's words. "I'll remember that, Dad." Marcus nodded. "I know you will." And with that, the evening settled in. Logan didn't need to say anything more. He had learned all he needed to know. Tomorrow, there would be other challenges, but for now, in this moment, he felt like he could face whatever came next, with the quiet strength his father had shown him. A strength that didn't need to shout, didn't need to fight for attention. A strength that stood tall, firm, and unbroken, no matter the noise of the world. The morning light filtered gently through the curtains, casting a warm glow across the living room. Logan woke slowly, stretching out in the quiet, still house. He had slept well, but his mind was already active, replaying the events of the day before. His father's calm resolve, the silent strength he had witnessed. He had always looked up to Marcus, but now he was beginning to truly understand him. Logan felt a sense of pride swell in his chest, a recognition that the lessons his father had taught him weren't just about how to fight or how to win, but how to stay grounded, how to stand firm without being rattled, even when the world tried to shake you. Downstairs, the smell of coffee was already wafting through the air. Marcus was up early, as he always was. Logan had learned over the years that his father was a man of routine, an early riser, always prepared, always with a purpose. But today, there was something different about the way Marcus moved. It was as if the events of yesterday had left a mark on both of them, a mark that would shape the days ahead. Logan made his way downstairs, his feet barely making a sound on the wooden floor. He found his father at the kitchen table, a steaming mug of coffee in front of him, his eyes focused on the window. It was a typical morning scene, but today there was a quiet between them, a shared understanding that had grown between father and son. "Morning," Logan said, settling down across from Marcus at the table. Marcus glanced up with a slight smile. "Morning, son. How'd you sleep?" "Good," Logan replied, his voice still carrying a hint of reflection. "I've been thinking about yesterday, about everything." Marcus nodded slowly, taking a sip of his coffee. "I figured you would." "I don't know if I fully get it yet," Logan said, his brow furrowed slightly. "But I'm starting to. I saw what you did, the way you handled everything with the guards, and how those 6 men stood up with you. It wasn't just about you, was it? It was about something bigger." Marcus leaned back in his chair, his gaze steady. "It's always bigger, son."
Life is never just about one moment or one person. It's about the way we carry ourselves and how we affect the world around us. Yesterday was a test, not just for me, but for everyone who watched, for you too. Logan took a deep breath, trying to process it all. I don't think I could have stayed as calm as you did. I don't know if I have that kind of patience. Marcus gave a small, knowing smile. Patience isn't something you're born with. It's something you build over time. It comes from knowing what's worth fighting for and what's not. The world will try to get under your skin, Logan. People will try to provoke you, push your buttons. But the real strength comes when you don't let them. Logan's eyes met his father's. You didn't fight back yesterday because you knew your strength wasn't about being physical, right? Marcus nodded. Exactly. The loudest voice in the room isn't always the strongest. The strongest voice is the one that doesn't need to shout. The one that commands attention by just being there, by standing tall and unwavering. Logan sat quietly, letting his father's words sink in. He was beginning to see things in a new light, understanding the depth of what Marcus had taught him over the years. It wasn't just about being tough. It was about solid, being grounded, and knowing when to speak and when to stay silent. It was about making a stand in the most subtle way possible. I think I get it, Logan said after a moment. It's not about the fight itself. It's about how you handle the situation. That's right, Marcus replied. You're learning.
The days following the graduation were quiet. Marcus and Logan settled back into their routine, though things had changed. Logan's perspective on life had shifted, and he could feel the weight of it in his daily actions. He was more patient now, more aware of how he carried himself. When people at school tried to provoke him, he remembered his father's lesson. He didn't need to fight every battle. He didn't need to engage with every challenge. Sometimes just standing firm was enough. It wasn't an easy lesson to learn. The world was still full of people who pushed, who tried to make a point, who tried to provoke. But Logan's mind kept drifting back to that moment in the gym, to his father, sitting still, unwavering, as the guards tried to make him move. The more Logan thought about it, the more he realized that it wasn't about just standing still. It was about choosing when to react and when not to. It was about having control over yourself and not letting others dictate your actions. One afternoon, Logan was walking through the school hallway when a group of his classmates started making fun of him. They were mocking his quiet demeanor, calling him Mr. Perfect, and teasing him about his tough guy act. Normally, Logan would have gotten angry. He would have retaliated in some way, trying to defend himself. But instead, he stopped in his tracks and looked at them without saying a word. He thought of his father. He thought of the stillness, the quiet strength. He took a deep breath and simply walked away. He didn't need to engage. He didn't need to prove anything. The teasing stopped, and Logan realized something important. His silence had been more powerful than anything he could have said in response. The others didn't know how to handle it. They had expected a fight, but when they didn't get one, they were left with nothing. Later that day, he called his father. "Hey, Dad," Logan said, his voice sounding different this time, more confident. "I handled something today. I didn't react the way I normally would." Marcus smiled on the other end of the line. What happened? Logan explained the situation, and Marcus listened quietly, then said, "You did good, Logan. That's exactly what I'm talking about. You don't need to react to everything. You don't need to fight every fight. The real test is in knowing when to stay still, when to walk away. That's what makes you stronger." Logan smiled to himself. For the first time, he felt like he was starting to truly understand his father. And in that understanding, he found a strength he hadn't known he had. The days turned into weeks, and life slowly returned to its normal pace. Graduation was behind them, but the lessons Logan had learned were just beginning to shape him in ways he hadn't expected. He found himself navigating life with a quiet confidence, no longer needing to shout or make a scene to be heard. One afternoon, Marcus came to Logan's room as he was packing for a trip to visit a college. "You've grown a lot in the past few weeks, son," Marcus said, his tone reflecting pride but also something deeper. "I'm proud of you." Logan looked up from his suitcase and smiled. "I think I'm finally starting to get it, what you've been teaching me." Marcus nodded, his eyes steady and sure. "You've always had it in you. You just needed to see it for yourself." As Logan finished packing, Marcus placed a hand on his shoulder, a gesture that was both familiar and comforting. "You're ready, Logan," Marcus said. "And remember, strength isn't about how loud you can be. It's about how still you can stand when the world is trying to shake you. You've learned that lesson, and now it's yours to pass on." Logan stood tall, looking his father in the eyes. "I will, Dad, I promise." With a final nod, Marcus left the room, leaving Logan alone with the weight of the moment. For the first time, Logan truly understood that the lessons of strength and resilience his father had taught him weren't just for surviving the world, they were for living in it, fully and quietly. As Logan prepared to leave for college, he took with him more than just his belongings. He carried with him the legacy of Marcus Harper's quiet strength, a strength that didn't need to be seen, but only felt. And as he walked into the next chapter of his life, Logan knew one thing for certain. He was ready to face whatever came his way, with dignity, with honor, and with the kind of strength that was built to last. The story of Marcus Harper and his son Logan teaches several important life lessons centered around strength, patience, and the power of silence. The primary message is that true strength is not always about confrontation or loud reactions, but about how one remains grounded and calm in the face of adversity. In moments of tension, like when Marcus faces the security guards at his son's graduation, his silent resolve speaks louder than any words or actions could. This teaches us the value of patience, and that sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is remain still and centered rather than reacting impulsively. Additionally, the story highlights the importance of knowing when to choose your battles, understanding that not every provocation deserves a response. This idea of standing firm without shaking is a powerful reminder that we are often defined not by how we react to others, but by how we carry ourselves when things are difficult. Ultimately, the story shows that strength comes from within, and the ability to maintain dignity and honor, especially in challenging situations, leaves a lasting impact on those around us.
If you found this video helpful or thought-provoking, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. It really helps more people discover our content. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss the latest updates from our channel. Thanks for watching. We will see you in the next videos.